Hi, and welcome back to the Me First Mindset podcast, where we're asking what would happen if you put yourself first. And on this episode today, I have Libby. She is a creatrix, and we get into honestly so many things in this podcast. You're going to have to just bear with us and take the ride because we're talking about embodiment. We're talking about somatic healing. We're talking about grief and grieving and the link that we have. Her and I both lost siblings in the recent years and how we're using that and alchemizing that and getting back to our bodies as the temple. So much in this 1 hour podcast. I don't want you to miss it. Go ahead and strap in, hear about what it takes to become your own creative center. And here it comes now.
Libby Hoffman. I'm a user experience designer and somatic and relationship coach. So I am a rebel and a troublemaker. So my first thing is like, how would that even happen? and and this is like, has been a struggle for me. And I
Yeah.
really am excited to get to share this even here because I'm not alone in this experience of life, but I am unique. I grew up in a family with 11 siblings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I grew up in a state where you know that everything is shared. You know that there is almost nothing except your underwear, toothbrush that belongs
Yeah.
just you. And there's something so beautiful about that. It deeply, deeply shifted how I relate with both physical things, physical space, and also just like shared time and even like working on things like art and projects. Like I'm a super, super collaborative person. As an adult, though, trying to navigate being a sovereign being, it was like I don't every act of being even alone, let alone like considering the thought myself first, because the problem if you've grown up always around others is even the act of being alone, your thoughts can be like, what's this person doing? What's Josh, Mimi, Isaiah, Abby, Hannah, Libby, Devin, Lynn, Nate, Elijah, Jack? What are they doing?
Yeah, you do. I mean, even people that don't have 11 siblings end up with that mindset of like trying to coordinate and collaborate with the people in their lives. Like even with dinner, like what do I want? I don't know. What does everybody else want? What do we have? What do we need? What timing is it? Like you have all of these kinds of things that you're solving for, even just with one other person. So I can't imagine 11 siblings being in this mix for you.
It's very real. So now I would say as an adult, like learning how to be with that question, I appreciate that I've let it be something that's worthy of wrestling with.
Mm,
And because when I was only trying to then learn how to be an individual, everything was a fight and a battle and a frustration. Well, why can't I think for myself? Why can't I make decisions alone? Why is it so hard to walk away from these types of dynamics? Why is it so hard to separate myself in this relationship, in this work relationship? It was like all I could see was my deep integration with others, and it became a problem.
hmm.
And so now I'm learning like, all right, there's beauty. There's beauty in being deeply integrated with others. And actually, in order for me to have healthy, authentic, open, honest, full, co-creative relationship, I have to be connected with myself. And
Right.
that's now like the redefinition. As an artist who like always wants things in polarity, I'm like, I can't just be first. Like I'm related with everyone. And if the collective's not happy, I'm not happy. And that's like a beautiful thing that's fueled activism in my life and concern for others and family dynamics and different things. However, learning how to say, I actually can't participate in fullness and authenticity and love and devotion and depth if I don't even know what it's like in the walls of my house, my inner house. That's the starting point. That's what me first means.
Yeah, and with us bleeding heart types that just really want to cause, that really want to just make our mark in the world, that see the suffering and really want to be a part of that solution, we can get really lost in feeling like our only purpose is for that other thing or that other person. And you're right, like the activism piece, it really moves the needle. It reminds me of like entrepreneurs that are just like so crazy in their own head that they end up, having the greatest breakthroughs. Like the madness is part of it for sure. And I think that for us, the coaches, the healers, the madness is in our sometimes self-abandoning behaviors. And also the medicine is in recognizing the wellspring that comes from. As soon as I hit my bottom and I'm completely depleted, I am not useful to myself or anyone else. And the problem that we see is that while that's all good intended and there's positive consequences that come with that, we can be so driven off track, even on our own path, when we are not able to create something from a space of being our own person. Where is the capacity for us to create from sovereignty, to create from truth if we don't even know what we truly stand for anymore? That's the hardest part, I think.
Yeah. And if we want to switch into work, I can name like that as related with my process.
I love
But
that. Yeah. So tell me what you do for work specifically, because I don't even know really what your process is. So give me a little highlight of, what you like, what lights you up, and what kind of services you offer, and then how that relates to the me first mindset, and then being able to balance those polarities.
yeah, beautiful. And in the spirit of shared space and shared life. Okay. I was gonna say I might have to change locations.
No worries.
Then the greatest thing to navigate in work from home life.
Truly.
All right. So I am someone who is, wait, do you mind before I jump into that, how you define me first mindset? Like, I guess,
Me?
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. At some point, I'm going to do my own podcast on why, like a solo cast, on why that's important to me. And my vision for the mindset is to give permission for people to choose themselves so that they can get back to being at home with who they are. And the reason why that's important for me is because when I work with people, I typically will see the chaos first. And then after a couple of sessions, I'm starting to recognize that they haven't done a single thing for themselves in like 10 years. The chaos in life comes from not being tethered or connected to your own truth. And the me first mindset is a way for me to showcase that when you do put yourself first, you fill yourself up, your cup is full, then you have a greater impact. You feel the differences in the felt sense of life. Your experience of life becomes different. And your offering is more authentic because we can really get our egos all kind of stuck in everything. And when we lead with ego, it feels good in the moments. And then when that ends, it all comes crashing down. We have these maybe it's a canon event. Maybe we have to go through it, right? But I see it so often is that you get to this almost pinnacle moment where your service is like so good. And then you're rotten on the inside. I hate this. I hate what I'm doing. I don't know who I am. I'm not connecting with anybody. I've become this person that I thought I needed to be for everyone else. And what's left inside of me is nothing. So, me first mindset is a way for us to be more authentic in the ways that we show up in the world so that we can have better, more lasting, more vulnerable, intimate connections from truth. And that is my greatest hope for these kind of conversations, and then also for the clients that I talk with.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, very helpful. Even though we use it, I'm an artist, so I love imagery. And then it also leads me at times to, I just love breakdown of language because we,
Yeah.
even as humans all the time, we're like, let's have this conversation, use the same words, not the same meaning behind the same words. So let's even break it
So
down further.
true. I mean, and that is also a huge theme between couples, right? Like my cultural implication of how I have heard and used these words in the past doesn't match up with my partner. And so while I'm saying this and he's saying the same thing, we're our mismatch. It's a whole different page. And there's not any fault. It's just, like you said, having the space for clarity, being able to have that conversation to match it so that we know like what we're trying to say here.
Exactly. And condition, there's like, I have my lived experience with this word and what it means. I have my own like cultural space. I have my workplace. I have all the things. And so these words mean this to me. Which to enter into, okay, getting that background on your relationship with it and the experience of the shell. This is what led my work 7 years ago to me now. So now I can introduce myself. I've been using the word user experience designer again. I haven't used this word for 7 years.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because I felt like a shell in it.
Okay, yes.
User experience designer, coach. And then depending on what circle I'm in, I love using the word creatrix. I also want to be accepted within academia. So we'll see when I feel like I'm comfortable using that space, but that word. But creatrix is divine feminine creator. So it's this blend for me. Creatrix is I'm a designer. I'm trained also as an embodiment coach and a relationship coach. But to me, that also, both those words, embodiment coach, relationship coach, even though that's luscious, beautiful, and being a user experience designer now is like on the very technical side of things. These polarities exist within me. My creatrix is the being in me that's fundamentally beneath both of those, that is looking for ways to create and design in the world. And sometimes that looks like visual design, and user experiences is about technology, these devices, our phones, these things in our pockets, and are they aligned with the making of the mind?
Mm.
Coaching is actually getting within the mind, or if you're an embodiment, getting within the mind body, and if you're in relationship coaching, getting within intimacy, sexuality. And yeah, there's this overlap in both of them. And I would often feel reduced when people would like, again, with language, I'm very particular, but people would be like, oh, you're a designer. And after I started getting paid as a designer, as someone studying UX design, I started getting paid for what was like a mix of coaching and design before I'd ever been taught coaching, because I
Mm.
already had this like deeply psychological background. So someone would say, design this PowerPoint, design this website, design this presentation, run this workshop. I was doing a lot of creative thinking, which was beautiful, but underneath it was provoking all these questions in me about who is designer, what is designer, who like what is creator, who gets to say what, who creates what by what rules, and there's politics in design too. And I just was pushing all these questions, and I was just like, I can't own this role. Like I'm a designer of what? I don't even know what I am. And also, you know, this is the beginning of a new age in technology. And I studied under teachers, like many people who've like interrogated their degree after they left, or, once they got in the field. I studied with teachers who were speaking on the positives of user experience and of mental work in relationship to technology. And then I got out and activated all my, somehow I had felt like I had like kind of shut down my culturally critical thinking while I was in the learning mode, because the learning
Yeah.
is intensive. And then it was like, once I was out of just the learning, it was like, oh, wait, all these skills without an ethical basis can just be used to create addiction. And in
Oh,
fact,
yeah, absolutely. 100%.
right. And so it led me to just be like, oh, I need to know what I believe. I need to know my ethical basis is, I need to know what I even believe about life and culture and society. And then with coaching, I actually, even though I'm newer in that space and like formally getting trained in it, but I've been helping someone write a book for several years before getting trained in emotional and embodiment coaching. There was this similar, like, it takes so much energy just to learn. So I was learning a lot there, and then got out and was like, oh, what am I using this for? Like this like deep felt sense of like, I need to be based in a type of ethics that's not being explored in just learning the practice itself. So for me, the ownership of Creatrix is the acknowledgement that I do what I do from a place of divine feminine embodiment. And then
Mm-hmm.
no more, we can break that down.
Well,
But like,
I love your rant on language, because I'm exactly the same way. I have this like passion for motivational interviewing, exactly how you say things. I used to say, when I was a coach more in the physical realm, I used to say, in order for your clients to do anything, you have to say it the right way. Like, how you say something is more important than what you say. And in psychology, that can be really true. We could kind of boil that down to manipulation in some ways, but when you're a coach, creatrix, healer, whatever, we do have a responsibility to communicate in a way that lands for a specific desired outcome if that person should pick that up and use it for themselves with their own sovereignty. So I really love your specifics on language. And I have to say, the funny part about it is before we got on camera, you and I were talking about, well, how weird should we get, right? How weird on this conversation, how like
Spectrum.
in the weeds on
Okay.
spirituality do we want to go? Like what's going to happen? And so when you were saying, and I don't know you too well, so when you were saying I am an experienced designer, I thought you were talking about coaching. So I was like, "Ooh, that's cool. That's a great way to explain the coaching container. I'm designing experiences for people." And then here you are talking about like really truly UX UI design, which is so funny to me because I'm like, okay, this is the layers here are so profound because you have been an experienced designer your whole life and now you're learning how to use that role, that title in a way that fits you, that you can feel really ethical about.
Yes, this is and that's such a good example. You heard the words and a whole image came, and then now you actually heard me explain it and you have a new image. And this, I want to name something that I use for like why the work of not just psychological workers, but like philosophical mind body explorers are needed right now. And it starts with like so I grew up in New York City. And oh, and I just want to name why I just gave that whole backstory of like my re-identification with certain titles or words too, is that in full transparency, like I'm actually new to being open to people, to like working with people, period, right now in the last 6 months. Like I
Okay,
have,
welcome.
thank you. I have been so yeah, I originally um I got lost in my own story, but like I originally was starting to get paid for design work and was like, oh my gosh, I never knew I could get paid. I never knew I could get like paid more than a minimum wage job. This is amazing. I'm gonna freelance and then go travel the world and say like F you to all these institutions that I don't want to be working for under their rules. And I did it and it was amazing.
Oh my gosh, that's great. I want to stop you right there because that's like a me first mindset, like pinnacle moment, right? Like you got to
Okay.
free yourself by choosing something that maybe you wouldn't have chosen in the past. And now it's led to like this whole different life that you didn't even imagine for yourself.
Yes. And there was like also I was thinking about this before coming on here in the like what matters to me when we're centering self. Like there's always the question like what self am I centering? Right? And like at the time that I made that choice to freelance, I was living in DC and I was hungover one morning and I
Mhm.
was pretty disappointed about it. Like I never had been someone who drank that much prior, but living in DC in this like, and I was working in politics, like in the Agency for International Development. I was doing work that I liked, but the drinking culture was just so high there. Like we go
Mm.
get hour after work, we party at night, we go out on the weekend. And I was a fitness instructor prior, and it was so hot and so muggy being there in the summertime that like you don't want to work out. You get off work, you're tired. It's the first time I've done 9 to 5 days in my life. Um, and because I've always been like doing some kind of fitness work, this was like my first like office job, like all hours consumed. And I was
Mm.
just like, oh, this is like not it. And I don't feel good, but I don't know how to make myself feel good right now. And
Hmm.
it was July 15th because my birthday's August 15th. So it was a
My
month.
birthday's August 12th. We have
Hey!
so many similarities. Of course you're a Leo. Of course you
Yes.
are. Okay, keep going.
But I was just like, I need, like, I don't, so I want to like name the importance of like just realizing you don't feel good in me first.
Yes.
Like when you know how to make yourself feel better, that's like one thing. When you put yourself, you're like, I need a haircut, or like, I want to go to the spa, or like, I need to sleep. When you don't know what will make yourself feel better, like that's one of the hardest places to be at.
Yes.
And at that time, it was just like, I don't know. Like I had been so freaking excited to like get this internship, get this house, move to DC. Like I hadn't really thought that far beyond it. And then I was there and I was just like, oh, like my body doesn't feel good. Myself doesn't feel that good. And I found a freelance workshop. One of my superpowers is that like I will locate the voice. in my, so there's like a me first moment too, like locate the, if you can find even one inkling, even if like 99% is like, this sucks or I don't like this, like, is there one part that has another idea? And I think I was like on event, I just wanted to find some type of event to go to that would like use more of my brain power and
Okay.
self. And I found this freelance workshop. And like that single workshop, I still remember it was a couple, and one was like a rap teacher, and he got like employed by elementary schools to come teach rap. And she was like a food, like they did random freelance stuff that you haven't thought of. And they told me the book, The $100 Startup,
Hmm.
which is like all stories of people who've taken little things and like start small and see what you can do small. You don't have to wait. So that was a huge door opening. But on the other side of that came a new, like, I don't know how to make myself feel good, which was I had very little structure in this 10 months traveling. And I opened myself to this experience of like, I just want to almost try to like de-Americanize or open myself up to other ways of thinking.
Yes, and it's so necessary to almost everybody that I speak to, this podcast or otherwise, that has had this realization of self needs time decompression. We need to be able to have space in our lives, in our brains, in our timeline to consider what is wrong. And the hard part about that, like you said, like, well, the American dream tells me this is all right. So why does it feel wrong? I don't know. This is right. And so redefining and really taking power over your own definitions, your own word choice, like you were saying, to redefine what is wrong and what to do about it is you need the time. So if you can afford yourself time to think in your pinnacle era, like your 25 or so timeline, like that's where it ends up being like so important for us to redefine and recalibrate to a life that actually makes sense to us.
Mm, yes. Yeah. And I apologize. I'm like, where was I go? Why? It's like hard to go. Okay. I think I went back into that to name, like, also me being like just vulnerably naming that I'm newer in coming back to like allowing myself to be available as a professional. And the reason for life, you make your choices, and then life also gives you that space sometimes without wanting it, or you don't, or you thought you were going to have the space, and then things happen. And that space that you thought you were going to have for something else is now something else entirely. So for me, like that period, those 10 months of travel, they opened up the whole like, okay, I have now new definitions of holistic health. I have new definitions of new senses about spirituality, consciousnix, how I'm perceiving the world. But in this period of my life, I was very much in this. Oh, I know where. I wanted to get back to being a philosophical mind body worker. Okay, so let me get there. This period of my life, I was in a state where I was like, I had just studied UX, and the question that I was asking was pretty much, am I only mind? Like I grew up deeply religious and then had dropped God from my life. So now I was like, I don't know what I believe about spirit. Like, I don't know that there's spirit. I don't know that there's source. I don't know what I believe. So it feels the safest to just assume that I have a brain, and like that's where the cognitive thinking is happening. And what I do know from UX is like I can manipulate the brain. So I would try to always manipulate things for myself. I am my own
Yeah.
UX all the time. And that's like one of the jobs that I've helped create Thrive is like around helping people be their own UX designer. But
Mm.
you can't only manipulate. You can only manipulate yourself so much. And I was starting to get this sense like, okay, when I would travel, where I'd be like, oh, there's like the deeper intuition. There's something else happening that does feel like more than just the thinking brain. I don't know how to explain it. It feels like it's an intuitive voice. Sometimes it's that I'm able to experience like deep joy, even when I'm physically sick or going through things that ordinarily you'd perceive as things that would be happy. And then like deeply distressed when I'm in a situation that like you would perceive as happy on the beach or something.
Right.
I was also starting to have panic attacks, not deep like ones where I needed other people's help, but like my body would get really hot. I'd be and it wasn't food poisoning, and I'd be waking up in the night like with my heart beating and with my stomach feeling sick. And it was at a time where like where certain foundational thoughts and beliefs I had about the word were being challenged. I was living in India, and India is a very different place.
That's so cool. I love that. So not only did you just travel a little bit, you traveled a lot. You got like to a whole different place.
Yeah, and like very different. I am someone who like I'm like if we're doing it big. And like I was in Southeast Asia. I was dating someone from India, so I was able to go and spend time with him there. And then I had a boss who had a nonprofit in South Africa. So I went
Oh,
there.
so cool. Yeah. And I hear this, and I didn't know any of this about you, which is so interesting because a lot of people that I've spoken with, like really getting back to their, like being able to peel all the layers back means exposure to different countries, exposure to different ways of being, exposure to different ways of thinking. Expanded consciousness almost needs us to travel so that we can see it from the entire different perspective of what we were expecting it to be, right? A lot of the times when I first went to travel, I don't know if this was true for you, but a lot of people were like, oh, you're going to get mugged or you're going to get, I guess some of that happens at some point, but it started to build a picture in my head of how scary and terrible other countries were and how much they hated Americans. And when I got there, that none of that was true. There was so much just like hospitality and friendliness and beauty and art and culture, and the mindset and the like even like Buddhist cultures are just so different, and I found it so refreshing. And I think it absolutely does contribute to our ability to hold different truths and create a life that means has more meaning for us specifically.
Yeah. And access to like first of all, yeah, overriding other people's stereotypes for sure. And finding out for yourself and think like all these things too are qualities where you can start to practice this in your own home environment. And I also would encourage people like, can you do anything outside of your routine? Like, because
Yeah.
you don't need to even hop on a plane. Like, I am someone who I do love travel, and I also do think like intercultural, interracial, like cross culture outside of your comfort zone relationships matter.
Hmm.
And also, though, like that shaking up of your pattern, like that started the day that day when I was like, I'm hungover and I don't want this to keep being my reality. I don't know where to go, but I'm going to do one thing different on this Saturday. Then I'm done. And that is a really key, like that takes courage. But that's when the new thinking can come because it's in the pattern over and over that like the new thought can't enter either, even though rhythms are also important. So
When
yeah, I
was this all for you? So when did you have this experience of taking a remote freelancing position and then traveling? How long ago was that?
7 years ago, 6 years
Okay.
ago.
So it just occurred to me. Another thing that we were talking about right before we got on camera was how you and I met.
Mhm.
And and it's kind of a wild story, right? Like the internet brings all kinds of people together. So not only do we have like a similar birthday and we work in like a similar dimension with coaching and healing, and we've got a lot of experiences that are the same as far as travel, but a couple of months ago I lost my sister. And abruptly, unexpectedly. And during the holiday, I freaking struggled with it. It was like way harder than I thought it was going to be. It was so stupid, right? It just like derailed me and I hate it and I war with it and it sucks. And so I did something that I don't usually do, and I posted a little like snippet of like personal stuff on my business page about losing my sister. And that's how I met you, because you came on and you were like, hey, I kind of know a little bit about how that feels. And you and I talked a little bit about losing, about being in the shittiest club of losing a sibling, because you've had that experience also. And it sounds like that was in like a similar timeline for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So first, my condolences. And
Same.
yeah, I came, so that trip already, I bring up like having some panic there because there's beauty in shaking up your schedule and your vibe and your energy and putting yourself out there. And one of my strengths is that I'm like, I don't care, throw me in the water. Like, let's go. At the same time, I had no lens for trauma at the time. And everything, I always described everything as like spiritual. Like I didn't have the word somatic yet. I didn't have the word embodiment, which to me is this bridge of like, I'm a whole being. I have a physical body, I have a mental body, emotional body, spiritual body, however you want to frame it. And they're all connected. It's not, I can't just like take out one from the other. And I was exploring what I believed about myself, but I didn't have a lens. So when I was just having physical sickness, I would just think, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. I had a bad dream. I'm awake in the night. Who knows? And
Mm.
then my brother was always this anchor. So I do have 11 siblings, and I genuinely love each of them. We're a rare family. I think that not to say we have no problems, but like there's an extraordinary amount of love there. My parents really like having a home full of love was their project. So they invested in it. They didn't just like have us and leave us. They really did invest in like building a home that was loving and deep. And there is a history of mental health issues in our family and that not being addressed deeply.
Mhm.
Also not having language for it there, and also growing up in New York City and in a very like not conservative necessarily, but just very traditional Christian home. My parents are still from the Midwest and from Grand Rapids, which is like a heavily Christian area. And religion and mental health don't have to be at war with each other, but at times we've made them to be. And it's like, well, if you have something off, it must mean because your relationship with God is off.
Yeah. I get what you're
It,
saying on
it
that.
yeah, it can create like a very like not a safe environment for even voicing internal struggle. And my brother suddenly, like very suddenly, went into some spirals, and we had about 6 months of knowing him struggling, but honestly, like that's still a short time. And I've met so many suicide survivors since. So I'm aware that there is like way shorter timelines that people have. And sometimes it's so out of nowhere. But at this time, I mean, after I got home from traveling, I moved to San Francisco. And I was already in a state that was like not fully, I felt very confused about how to relate to my family. I felt very confused about how to relate to America, the US. I felt very confused about how to relate to making money or what my purpose was. Like everything was already very shaken in my world, but I was an extrovert, go-getter adventurer who's like, we just keep, like I'll find the way and I'm exploring. And then he got sick was expressing symptoms of suicidal thought, but messaging me at the time too. And everyone was worried. And I was like, you guys are just like, you don't know him. Like, if you're actually worried, you don't actually know him, because he's an artist. He's a deep thinker, but he's also deeply grounded. Like, this is a period that we go through. Very identified with him. It's the period that we go through. Those of us who rethink all of life, like you go through the fire,
Yeah.
you want to be here.
Man,
And
I remember with my sister in some ways, it's a little different circumstance. It wasn't suicide. It was, maybe not an accident, but there's not really a clarity on the exact way that happened. It was also just sudden. But the same, I remember being like, come on, like we have to toughen up. Like I feel the same way you feel. Like I know that we're going through same, like identifying with, the ways that like maybe interpsychic abilities come through, and like being a weird person in a hard, like hard world, and having, a softness and an intuition that doesn't quite fit in, and having to navigate that. I get all of that. And same, like I was like having these conversations with my sister for like a month, 2 months, 6 months, 8 months, just trying to be like, make it, come on.
yeah,
Like you
yeah,
just
yeah.
have to keep going. And oh, it sucks, man. Like it sucks when it doesn't happen the way you want it to.
It's like they're honestly, oh, like it is there's no words. And I hate talking about, like I like talking about it because I actually am ready. Like it's now 2024. This was 2019. But I thought like, so you're making this now. Like I thought like I'll be not okay for a couple of weeks or months. And then it was
Same.
like,
Yeah.
I got home from that trip several months later, like less than a year later, my brother passed, and then I moved, like I went on another trip being like, it's fine. I can keep going. Crashed, moved home and was like, okay, I'm gonna process. And then COVID hit.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Like
Yeah.
I was talking about how space doesn't always like turn out how you think. Like you can plan, and all of a sudden, like the way space feels, like the thing about traumatic events too is like every damn thing in space, in physical space, mental space, emotional space, spiritual space, however you conceptualize what space means, because I do believe it's multidimensional. Every
Mhm.
single one of those spaces changes. So you could have had a plan to go to the beach that day, and now like that beach day is like consumed with grief day.
Oh yeah, like every, and then also like the imprint across the generations, like every day, every, anniversary of that death, or we were just talking also like, having these crazy times where like my sister's birthday will come up. I'll just be like happy and like hanging out. And all of a sudden, March 17th will come up somehow. And I'm like derailed for the rest of the day because it's a message. I think it's a message from her. And also, there's just that, emotional reaction. Yeah. I have a question for you. I know we kind of have been like pinging all over the place here, which I love. And it's been really great. And I love getting to know you and your story. But I have a question for you about somatic embodiment. And do you think I'm 7 months out? My sister passed away 7 months. It's not even been a year. And yeah, I'm in it a lot more than I ever thought I was going to be. Do you think that your work in somatic embodiment has been a pillar for you in being able to tolerate and manage and process and going forward with that?
Yes, 100%. And this is this is why I name like to just circle it back around, because I do love circling it. And I'll answer with this, like to not, again, with the context of like you don't know how to make yourself feel good, but you need to like to put yourself first. You also are like, which self do I put first? Like how? What does putting myself first means? Because I could eat these chips, I also could take a walk. Like what is putting myself first in this
Yeah, do I
moment?
push myself to get up or do I let myself sleep?
Or do I go hang out with people because socializing is also good for me? Or do I go alone because going deep is also good for me?
Right.
What point am I getting into a place that's like a negative spiraling circle? That's language
Right.
I did, but so for me also there was like a big resistance to going into traditional psychological care after his passing. And this is like one of the like when I decided to start doing coaching work this year, like first I made this video just about my relationship with bipolar. He was diagnosed with bipolar 2 right at the end. I've never gotten diagnosed, but I've dealt with, like from the time I was a kid, my dad would like draw these little images for me and say, like other people's emotions, they go like this and like this, and like yours go like this and like
We
this.
have to have another conversation on camera. This is not going to be enough. We only have like 10 minutes left. And
Yeah.
I had a bipolar diagnosis as a child that I had recorrected as an adult. So we have to like bookmark all the things we need to go back and talk on because
Yes.
this is the similarities are insane and it's this so like you can't make it up. It just keeps coming up. So interesting. And thanks for sharing that. Like there is absolutely so much to be said on why you felt that initial resistance towards it and like what's under there. So,
And like, I made a video just to share because I thought, I feel like a hip, like there's just a part, I care a lot about honesty and authenticity. And I was like, it's very important for me to like not step into the space of coaching and be like, I'm here to fix your problems. Like, I'm not here to fix anyone's problems.
right.
But I do like to say I'm a member of your team. And I believe I've read this recently in an article on suicide too. They said, when you have cancer, there's like multiple people on the team, and it's like no questions asked that you're going to have the surgeon, and you're going to have this and this and this and this. But when someone's mentally struggling, it's like, oh, even to get a therapist is stereotyped. And my vision of a more of a more informed future of what the body and mind are is every damn person has a team. Like our culture is shifting, so we actually have a more life affirming, life giving, energizing culture because the
Mm,
culture very like aligned with Dr. Gabor Mate and the ways in which our cultural patterns are also creating sickness. However, I also believe we're going to be in an evolutionary period for now where we are going to be suffering,
Mm-hmm.
are going to be suffering in the ways that they are. Like I want to both work on sustainable solutions to focus and acknowledge that traditional ADHD diagnosis and medication for some is going to be what they need, and acknowledge that we could have a whole different education system where this type of focus wasn't the only thing rewarded, because how did that ever benefit a creative person? So
Right.
there Ken Robinson there on the work of creativity. I just want to name for that. So like we're all those of us who want to be part of the now I don't even want to use the word solution, but the like revitalization and reawakening to the depth and beauty of just what I call the creative mind. Like we are many, and there are many places for us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like what I want to name for, as I name like why somatic healing is so important in this mix, is just that there's a mix and there's so many types of workers. And if I look back on me, who is like, I don't want to go see a therapist because I don't want to be diagnosed. I honor that I knew what I'm going through is actually like happening on a very deep level. I had like known about chakras, had learned about energy work. I had no idea how to get into it, but I was like, something deeper is happening. And thank God, goddess, universe, like I had a dream the month to date of my brother's death, where everyone else, my brother had brought this like calmness and explanation that in the dream didn't make sense, but in like emotionally it made sense. He was helping everyone make sense of what happened, and everyone else was like okay with it, and I was just like blah blah blah, like typical me, so many questions, like I want to know what I don't, this doesn't make sense. And my sister looked at me, which is also like very typical people in my life, just being like, he just explained all of it. Like, do you need like, how do you still have more questions? And he just like put his hand on me and he's like, Libby, ask your questions. And I have not stopped asking questions. And the questions I'm asking are for my survival and questions that I believe are pertinent to the healing and growth and development and freedom and aliveness of all of our survival, which cannot happen without the activation of the depth of body mind, whatever body mind is. There's going to
Yeah.
be multiple ways to frame it: body, mind, brain, spirit, source, energy, and how all that's connected. And what somatics did for me so I went through years of just pretty much like mixing spirituality and religion and trying and just being of service and just trying to put the attention off myself and trying to put it on myself, and just a move to Hawaii in that process, and was like, let me connect with the ancestors. Also, let me like study the Baha'i faith, which is a religion about the relationship of the religions. Like, was kind of looking. And then in Hawaii, got exposed to ecstatic dance.
Mm.
Tried ecstatic dance prior, but it was there that like, I'd never seen it as like, before that, it was like a social event. And at this time, it started being like, oh, this is
A
actually healing.
modality.
Yeah, like something's actually shifting.
Yes.
And I knew I want to study sexuality because like I'd known that pre my brother's death, but then after that happened, it like plunged me so deep in the mind side of things that I felt disconnected from body. And I
Mm.
like, this also is so deep, like working on sexuality as someone who was raised religious also just had so much weight to me that I was
Yes.
like, let me give this 2 years, and like if this is still of interest, I'll come back.
Mm.
And then 2 years passed, and it did. And like as the beauty of life goes, when you keep like staying open to a thing, I was like aligned with Layla Martin at the time. Now I actually feel quite like I've gotten what I needed from her as a teacher, and I'm seeking other teachers, but that's also important in the mind body work. Like not every teacher, not every approach, not every modality is going to be your lifelong one. But
Right. I mean, nothing should be. You should become your own, right? Like that's the me first mindset. And it's like you start off by watching this and listening to other people and finding a coach and making your way. And then that spark starts to like kindle, and then you start to be your own compass. And then you have something new that births within you and you start to follow that instead. And that's exactly what we should be doing.
oh, So that is like, I didn't fully have that ingrained yet. I think I was still looking for like my one solution. I think for a long time I've suffered from that. Like, I just say suffered in quotes. It's not a horrible
Yeah.
sufferings, but it is a deep suffering. Like when you think one person will fix it.
And I
Or
think that's also so, like, it's so relatable in the spiritual community because most of us that are coaches come in with a deep trauma, with something that we're trying to fix on ourselves, knowing that we want to save everybody else from the same kind of fate, this suffering. And so like we're looking, like you said, for solutions, and we're like, what's the thing? And if we don't ever break the cycle of looking for it externally, then we never find it because it's in here. That's a good coach, a good guide, a good, program is always going to point you back to your own truth. And you said this earlier, like, I can't heal you. I don't have that. You have it. I can point you back to you. And all of this stuff is all just ultimately going to point you back to your own home center.
yes. And that is like, I actually feel so grateful that it was like in that experience of like so much of that triggering me, because it's it's very normal that like I think I don't know, I'm still in it, but like that the exact environment that is your nurturing space like is can also be triggering you at the same time.
And
Like,
we have to have the
yeah,
mirror that points the bright light into the dark shadows so that we can start illuminating the core beliefs and the patterns and behaviors and the experiences that no longer serve, right? Like that shedding process has to happen. And this is it feels sort of like whatever light shines in your eyes when you first get born, right? Like you need the light, and also it's highly uncomfortable, and that's what
yeah,
creates
it
the
has to
action.
be. And I think like I had like, so I did end up having one type of coaching experience following my brother's death. And that was also a gift at that time. And that was from a psychological institute in California who really believed in what was they called the unity of the mind, which is that the mind actually can work for you, but it's like working with these like deep polarities and things that feel like inner war. And they had some embodiment approaches within their work, but it was mostly very philosophical and very masculine. And I was working with a man. And then it was like, there was just a certain point where I was like, I know this is something feminine. Like, I know I need to work with a woman. And my coach was like, no, it's all right. No offense taken. I can support you in looking for someone. And I was like, like, I don't know. I know this has to be me. Ended up finding this experience. And then in working with sexuality, just to name like working with grief, I thought like I'm 4 years out. I'm okay. Like I've already worked on that piece. I'll come in this program and get to start working on romantic relationships. And then instead it was like my whole damn heart is broken open and
Yeah.
all the heartbreak is in there. And like what an interruption, like you mentioned it earlier about the holiday, it just feels like such an interruption. You're like, I wanted this space. Like, no, this is supposed to be mine. And it's like that
Yeah, man. Like it just, and it,
falling.
I heard somebody else say before, like grief is the only emotion that you can't schedule. Like it's the only one that you really can't, like that one will come in whenever it wants to come in. Like that's the one that really is the most difficult to regulate your nervous system around. And it has so much to do with love. Like we're talking about sexuality, and the creation of sexuality is love vibration. And so it makes sense that when we're working with our own internal source of creation energy, life force energy, that is sexuality, and it also is love. And so the people that we've lost, that we freaking miss, that we love, are going to be in that container with us. And we're wrapping up right now because we had so many like amazing conversations. And so if you're listening, bookmark all of these because they're probably going to be this might be a series at some point, I think. As we just go through, like we've talked about travel, we've talked about the possibility of redefining your mental health outside of the stigma of traditional labels in the DSM types of labels. Also talking about, I want to talk back through somatic embodiment and somatic work with you on a deeper level on a whole one topic, I think, going forward. And so that I think that, with that, I'm going to have you give us a little bit more information about who you are, what you do. We've kind of primed the pump for you to be able to say something specific on exactly what you're working towards and how people can get a hold of you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And I want to name, there's 3 different efforts I'm working on. I am, as a creatrix, there's many, us creatrixes, we weave our web. So at the heart of all my work is this divine feminine current, this divine feminine Shakti energy that I feel is so beautifully needed in tandem and duo with the masculine. I believe that the divine feminine energy, I also name divine feminine, not reduction of any other gender. We contain polarity, but there's
Right.
spectrums, and there's night and day, and there's every damn time of day. And there is feminine and masculine within all of us. And
Mhm.
all of us are in seeking of this healthy relationship to this polarity and to all that exists between. And I'm always still navigating what that means. But I beautifully, beautifully am like surrendered to this force coming through me, and then empowering others to find their relationship to this. And I believe there's multiple avenues that comes through. So I work within consulting, that's my UX background, and systems innovation. And that, the reason I asked Dr. Bree before, like, where's your, like, what's okay to talk about on this podcast? Like, I'm still working with how I hold my sexuality work with this public consulting work, which is called Elegance Lab. And that's for business owners and people who actually want to approach the work they're doing in this world. Because we don't just need our healers and coaches working on the individual level. We also have collective work to do together. And that can be created, those environments, that's experience design too. Find me at Elegance Lab with an underscore or liberatory.love or Thrive.